Have you ever noticed that, when you were a child, a year seemed practically endless? But today the months simply disappear before your eyes? One day you're starting the week and, before you know it, it's Friday. You blink, and the year is over. Christmas arrives, out of nowhere, your birthday approaches faster than it should, and that strange feeling appears. Where did the time go? Have you ever experienced this? When we were little, school holidays seemed to last an eternity. A Sunday afternoon seemed endless. Waiting for our birthday was almost a test of patience. But now, in adulthood, everything seems to rush by. Days pass quickly, weeks fly by, and years accumulate like pages turned without us even noticing. And the most unsettling thing is that this feeling isn't just an impression. It's shared by millions of people around the world. This makes you wonder, does time really speed up as we get older, or does something change inside our brains? Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might surprise you. Science has been studying this phenomenon for decades, and the answers involve much more than clocks, calendars, or increasingly busy schedules. We're talking about perception of time, memory, attention, and so-called strange phenomena of the human brain. In other words, time doesn't change, we are the ones who change. Think about it. When was the last time you experienced something completely new, something that truly broke the routine? In childhood, practically everything was new. Each experience was recorded in rich detail by the brain. Today, many days seem the same. Waking up, working, solving problems, sleeping, repeating. And that's exactly where something curious happens. The human brain doesn't measure time like a clock. It measures time based on experiences, emotions, and memories. The less memorable they are, the faster the period seems to have passed when you look back. Have you ever noticed how intense moments seem to last longer while they're happening? A frightening situation, an important conversation, a new experience. In those moments, time seems to stretch. Now compare that to an entire week lived on autopilot. When it ends, it feels like it simply evaporated. This contrast is one of the keys to understanding why time seems to accelerate as we get older. And there's another fascinating detail that almost no one notices. For a child, a year represents a huge slice of their life. For an adult, that same year is just another small fragment within a long personal timeline. The brain makes silent comparisons all the time, and these comparisons shape our perception of reality, including the passage of time. Perhaps you're wondering now if this means we're doomed to feel the years passing by faster and faster. Or if there's any way to slow down this feeling, even if the clock keeps ticking the same seconds. This question isn't just curious, it's profoundly human. And the answer involves neuroscience, psychology, and the choices we make every day without realizing it. What seems like a simple inconvenience of aging is, in fact, one of the most intriguing mysteries of the brain and the human body. And as we delve into this topic, you will begin to see time, and your own life, in a completely different way. And as you listen to all this, perhaps a specific memory has surfaced in your mind. A period of your life that seems to have passed too quickly. Or perhaps, a phase in which each day seemed long, intense, almost endless. If this topic resonates with you, pause for a second and think. When did time start to speed up in your life? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Sharing your experience isn't just a detail, it's what transforms this space into a real conversation, where others realize they're not alone in feeling the exact same thing. If you've ever been through this, if you've ever had that strange feeling of looking back and thinking, how did it all go by so fast? Liking this video is a simple way to show that this type of content matters to you. Each like helps the video reach more people who, at this very moment, are also silently asking themselves these questions about time, life, and their own minds. If you enjoy scientific curiosities, mysteries of the human body, and those strange brain phenomena that almost no one explains clearly, subscribing to the channel is almost like saying, I want to continue this conversation. This is what allows this type of content to continue being produced, explored in depth, and shared with more and more people. Your participation here truly makes a difference. It sustains the channel, expands the reach of the message, and creates this curious, reflective, and restless community that we are building together. Now, hold on to that feeling, that question that's been echoing inside you. Because to understand why time seems to accelerate with age, we need to look even more closely inside the human brain, and that's exactly what comes next. And it's crucial to make this very clear from the start. This feeling that time is passing faster, that it's not imagination, nor emotional exaggeration, that it's not just nostalgia, nor a side effect of busy adult life. This phenomenon is real, consistent, and widely studied by psychology and neuroscience. It has a name, a solid scientific basis, and reveals a profound, and often uncomfortable, truth about how the human brain perceives its own existence. Researchers call this subjective perception of time. Understanding this concept radically changes how we view the passage of time. The central point is simple yet extremely powerful: time doesn't speed up. Seconds remain the same length, minutes don't get shorter, and days still have 24 hours. Nothing changes on the clock. What changes is the brain. More specifically, the way it interprets, organizes, and records experiences throughout our journey changes. In other words, time is objective, but the experience of time is profoundly subjective. And this difference is what creates the feeling that life is slipping through our fingers. For a long time, it was believed that this perception was linked only to the increased responsibilities, decisions, and worries of adult life. But the most recent findings show that the explanation goes far beyond that. The human brain doesn't function like a neutral stopwatch. It functions like an editor. It chooses what deserves prominence, what will be stored in depth, and what can be compressed or even ignored. This process happens behind the scenes of the mind without us realizing it, and it is precisely there that time begins to distort. In childhood, the brain is in a constant state of discovery. Everything is new. Everything demands attention. Each experience carries a greater emotional and cognitive weight. This causes the brain to register an enormous amount of detail, creating dense and rich memories. This accumulation of records gives the feeling that time is long, full, almost infinite. In adulthood, a silent transformation occurs. The brain learns patterns, recognizes repetitions, and creates shortcuts to save energy. Similar experiences cease to be recorded with the same level of depth. The result is direct. When you look back, there are fewer mental milestones in that period, and this makes time seem compressed. Neuroscience shows that the perception of time is deeply linked to memory. It is not time that determines memory, it is memory that shapes the sensation of the passage of time. Periods filled with new experiences, intense emotions, and mindfulness generate more mental records, creating the impression that they lasted longer. Periods dominated by routine, autopilot, and repetition, on the other hand, generate few distinct records. When this period ends, the brain makes a kind of summary, and the feeling is that everything passed too quickly. This revelation is unsettling because it directly connects time to the choices we make every day, often without realizing it. There is also a powerful psychological factor that is rarely discussed. The brain interprets time proportionally to our own existence. For a child, a year represents a huge portion of life. For an adult, that same year is just another fragment within a long personal timeline. This comparison is not conscious. It happens automatically. It's as if the brain adjusts the scale of experience based on what has already been lived. The greater the baggage, the smaller each new stretch of the journey seems. But the most revealing aspect of this phenomenon is that it is not entirely passive. It doesn't happen randomly. It is directly linked to how we live, the decisions we make, the mindset we adopt towards our routine, and the attention we give to the present. When the brain goes into automatic mode, it stops creating deep memories. And when that happens, time ceases to be lived consciously and becomes merely a passage through time. Days pass. Weeks disappear. Years accumulate. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because understanding the subjective perception of time is not just a scientific curiosity. It's a powerful lens through which to view one's own life. It reveals inner workings of the mind that directly impact our sense of presence, meaning, and identity. What seems like just an inconvenience of aging is, in fact, a silent reflection of how we are living our journey. And as we begin to connect these dots, time ceases to be just an abstract mystery and becomes a mirror. Before moving on, leave a simple sentence in the comments that sums up how you felt after hearing all of this. Write it down, that makes sense to me. When we compare the child's brain with the adult brain, it becomes much clearer why time seems to change its behavior throughout life. In childhood, the brain functions like a tireless explorer. Everything is new, everything attracts attention, everything demands interpretation. A simple walk to school becomes an adventure full of visual stimuli, sounds, smells, and emotions. Every detail is recorded intensely because the brain doesn't yet know what is irrelevant. It observes everything. It records everything. And the more information it records, the more full that period seems when stored in memory. Children don't live on autopilot. They are present. They ask questions. They are surprised by simple things. And this has a direct impact on their perception of time. The more novelty, the more mental records. The more mental records, the greater the sensation of duration. It's as if the brain were creating an extremely detailed photo album of that period of life. When you flip through that album later, it seems enormous. And that's one of the hidden truths behind why childhood seems so long when we remember it. As the years go by, something begins to change silently. The adult brain undergoes a profound, though almost imperceptible, transformation. It learns patterns. It recognizes repetitions. It understands what it has seen before. And, to function efficiently, it begins to conserve energy. What is predictable ceases to receive full attention. What is routine ceases to be registered in depth. Not because it is less important, but because the brain understands that it does not need to expend resources on something it already knows. This mechanism is brilliant from a survival standpoint. It allows us to make faster decisions, react efficiently, and navigate life with less cognitive effort. But there's a little discussed side effect. When the brain registers less novelty, it creates fewer memorable experiences. And fewer memories mean a feeling of shorter time when we look back. It's not that the days were shorter. It's that they were more similar to each other. Think about a typical week in adult life. Many days follow a similar script. Wake up, work, solve problems, complete tasks, sleep. When that week ends, the brain does a kind of editing. It doesn't store each day separately, it creates a summary. And when everything becomes a summary, the feeling is that it passed too quickly. This is one of the most important behind-the-scenes aspects of time perception, and few people stop to reflect on it. In childhood, each week is unique. Each day has its own weight. In adulthood, however, several weeks merge into a single generic memory. That's when that strange feeling arises that the months have disappeared. In reality, they haven't disappeared. They have been compressed by the way the brain has decided to record them. This compression doesn't happen by chance. It's directly linked to repetition and a lack of novelty. There is also a strong emotional component to this equation. Intense emotions increase the level of attention and deepen the recording of experiences. When something moves us, the brain understands that it matters. It marks that moment. It creates a highlight. When emotions are neutral or repetitive, the brain goes into economy mode. It glosses over the details. And this directly impacts the perception of the passage of time. This process reveals something important about our journey as adults. Often it's not that time is passing too quickly. It's that life is being lived in an excessively predictable way. The mentality of constant repetition, without pauses for novelty, without spaces for discovery, creates the illusion of acceleration. The impact of this goes beyond the perception of time. It affects the feeling of meaning, of presence, and even of identity. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because this difference between the child's brain and the adult brain is not just a scientific curiosity. It reveals silent choices we make every day. Choices that shape our experience of time without us even realizing it. How we deal with routine, how we react to the new, how we open ourselves to different experiences. All of this directly influences how the brain constructs our internal reality. When life becomes nothing more than a sequence of obligations, the brain responds by reducing the level of attention. It enters survival mode. And in this mode, time ceases to be lived and becomes merely traversed. This is one of the great paradoxes of adult life. The more we try to gain time by being efficient, the more we feel that it is slipping away. But this is not a definitive sentence. The brain is plastic. It adapts. It responds to stimuli. It changes according to how we live. And understanding this difference between the child's brain and the adult brain is the first step to seeing time in a different way. Not as an invisible enemy, but as a direct reflection of how we are conducting our own journey. Before moving on, write a simple sentence in the comments that represents what just went through your mind. Comment below, "That makes sense to me." There is another fascinating element that helps explain why time seems to accelerate as the years go by, and it is as simple as it is powerful. It is what many researchers call the invisible mathematics of time. Invisible because almost no one realizes that the brain performs this calculation all the time, automatically, silently, behind the scenes of the mind. But when you understand this logic, something changes in the way you see your own journey. Think about it for a moment. For a 5-year-old child, a single year represents about 20% of their entire life. It's a huge slice of existence. For that child, a year isn't just a unit of time, it's almost an eternity. Now compare that to a 50-year-old adult. For them, a year represents only 2% of their life. It's a small fraction, almost insignificant when compared to everything they've already lived. And the brain perceives this difference even if you've never consciously done the math. The human brain does not interpret time in an absolute way. It interprets time in a way relative. Everything is compared to what has already been experienced. This is one of the most important revelations of this theme, because it shows that time is not felt in seconds or minutes, but in proportion to our own history. The greater the baggage of accumulated experiences, the shorter each new stretch of the journey seems. In childhood, each year carries enormous weight. Each phase is a transformation. A year completely changes who you are, what you know, what you can do. In adulthood, however, a year rarely provokes such a visible change. Often, it passes without major external milestones. And the brain, when making this proportional comparison, interprets this period as something small, quick, almost disposable. Not because it is less important, but because it is smaller within the total context of life. This silent mathematics profoundly influences the perception of time. The brain is constantly asking without words, is this big or small compared to what I've already lived? And as the years accumulate, the answer tends to always be the same, small. That's why the years seem to shrink. Not because they are shorter, but because they are being compared to an ever-growing story. This mechanism has a profound psychological impact. It shapes how we experience the present and how we remember the past. A year in childhood seems eventful because it occupies a huge space on the personal timeline. A year in adulthood seems to pass quickly because it occupies a smaller and smaller space on that same timeline. It's a mathematical illusion created by the brain, but its emotional effects are very real. The most curious thing is that this proportional logic also influences our decisions and our mindset. When the brain senses that time is passing quickly, a diffuse feeling of urgency arises. The impression that there's no more time, that the years are flying by. This feeling impacts choices, priorities, and even how we deal with dreams, projects, and changes. Many people feel they are always chasing after time when, in reality, they are reacting to this distorted perception created by their own minds. This is a hidden truth that is rarely discussed. It's not just the clock that influences our lives, but how the brain interprets the proportion of time lived. This alters how we see opportunities, risks, and even ourselves. Life's journey seems to accelerate, and with that comes the feeling that everything needs to be done now, that there is no room for pause, reflection, or presence. But this invisible mathematics doesn't act alone. It adds to routine, repetition, and the way we record memories. The more predictable life is, the less impact each period has. The less impact, the less space that time occupies in memory. And the less space in memory, the faster it seems to have passed. It's a silent cycle that reinforces itself over the years without us realizing it. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because this proportional logic of time reveals something even more unsettling. It shows that the feeling of acceleration is not only linked to age, but to how life is perceived internally. When everything becomes a comparison, when everything becomes a percentage, the present loses density. And when the present loses density, time ceases to be lived to its fullest. Understanding this mathematics of time is like lifting the backdrop of one's own mind. It's realizing that what we feel isn't a personal flaw, but a natural effect of how the brain constructs meaning. And when we begin to see this mechanism, we open up space to question something even deeper. Is there a way to restore weight, density, and impact to our days, even as the years go by? Before moving on with this reflection, write a word or short phrase in the comments that represents what this idea sparked in you. Write it down. I'm on this journey too. There comes a point when almost every adult notices something unsettling. The days continue to be full, sometimes even fuller than ever, but when you look back, it seems like nothing has been remembered. That's where one of the quietest and most impactful aspects of time perception comes in. Routine, autopilot, and what many call, without exaggeration, zombie mode. Not because the person is lifeless, but because they are living without real presence. When routine takes over, the brain enters a state of maximum economy. It understands that it already knows the way, already knows what comes next, already predicts the outcome. And when this happens, something fundamental changes. The level of attention drops drastically. The brain begins to operate as an automatic system, executing tasks without deeply involving emotion, curiosity, or full awareness. This mechanism is efficient, but it exacts an invisible price. The brain creates memories based on attention and meaning. When you live on autopilot, almost nothing seems worthy of being deeply recorded. The days look alike. The weeks repeat themselves. The months blend together. And when that period ends, the brain does exactly what it's been trained to do. It summarizes everything. Not because nothing happened, but because nothing stood out enough to become a landmark. And the fewer striking memories there are, the faster that period seems to have passed when you look back. This is one of the most uncomfortable paradoxes of adult life. The busier the routine, the greater the feeling that time is flying by. Schedules become full, decisions pile up, responsibilities increase. But, internally, the experience of time becomes shallow. It's as if life is being lived in low resolution. Everything happens, but little remains. In childhood, this is rare. Children don't live on autopilot because almost nothing is predictable. Every situation requires interpretation. Every experience is new. In adults, however, the brain learns to recognize patterns quickly. This is an advantage for survival, for work, for efficiency. But, at the same time, this constant repetition pushes life towards a state of extreme predictability. And predictability is the enemy of deep memory. The zombie mode doesn't appear suddenly. It sets in gradually. One day becomes another. One week blends into the next. When you realize it, you're living more to fulfill obligations than to feel. More to react than to choose. More to solve problems than to experience them. And the brain, true to its internal logic, understands that there isn't much to register. It glosses over the details. It conserves energy. It moves on. The impact of this goes far beyond the feeling of accelerated time. It affects mindset, perception of meaning, and even how we view our own journey. Many people describe this phase of life as if they are running all the time, but without knowing exactly where to. There is movement but a lack of presence. There is action but a lack of awareness. And when awareness fades, time seems to slip away even faster. The most curious thing is that when something breaks the routine, the effect is immediate. An unexpected trip, a deep conversation, a new challenge, a decision that requires courage. At those times, time seems to slow down. The days become longer. The memories become more vivid. This is no coincidence. It's the brain switching off autopilot and returning to attentive mode. It registers more. It feels more. It lives more. This is an important revelation because it shows that time doesn't accelerate simply because we age, but because we allow life to become excessively predictable. Constant routine creates an illusion of speed. Not because the days are short, but because they become almost invisible when they are all the same. The brain doesn't differentiate what doesn't stand out. And what doesn't stand out seems to disappear. There's a hidden truth here that often generates discomfort when perceived. Many times the feeling that time is passing too quickly is, in fact, a reflection of a life not fully lived in the present. Not in the sense of lack of activity, but in the sense of lack of conscious attention. It's possible to live a lot and feel little. And when that happens, time loses its density. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because understanding the role of routine and autopilot isn't just about the perception of time. It's about transformation. It's about realizing how small, almost invisible daily choices shape the entire experience of life. It's behind the scenes of these seemingly simple decisions that the brain determines whether time will be remembered as something full or empty, long or short, meaningful or merely functional. When we begin to see this clearly, something changes. The feeling of acceleration ceases to be merely an annoyance and becomes a signal. A silent warning that perhaps life is being traversed too quickly internally, even if everything seems under control on the outside. And this perception opens up space for an even deeper reflection on presence, attention, and conscious choices. Before moving on, write a word or short phrase in the comments that represents how you felt when you heard this. Write it down. That makes sense to me. There is something even deeper operating behind the scenes of our perception of time, something that cannot be measured by clocks, calendars, or full schedules. It is something silent, internal, and extremely powerful. The role of emotions and attention. This is where time ceases to be merely a curious sensation and begins to reveal a hidden truth about how we are experiencing each moment of our journey. The human brain doesn't measure time in hours or minutes. It measures time in emotional intensity. When we are emotionally present, when something truly moves us internally, the brain completely changes how it registers that experience. Strong emotions act like an internal spotlight. They tell the brain, this matters, this needs to be remembered. And when that happens, the sensation of time changes. Time seems to lengthen, gain weight, gain density. Imagine a moment of intense fear. A near accident, an unexpected situation, an instant when everything seemed to spiral out of control. In a few seconds you perceive every detail around you. Sounds become clearer, movements seem slower, thoughts multiply. It's as if the world goes into slow motion. This is not imagination or emotional exaggeration. It's the brain entering a state of maximum alertness to ensure survival. It accelerates information processing, and the side effect is the feeling that time has stretched. The same happens with moments of passion, discovery, and profound learning. When you fall in love, when you learn something that changes your way of seeing the world, when you face a challenge that demands courage and presence, the brain becomes completely involved. It switches off autopilot. It engages, feels. And in this state, time takes on a different texture. The days seem longer while they are happening. And when they pass, they leave deep marks, almost impossible to erase. This contrast reveals something fundamental about the human experience. Emotionally intense moments seem long while they are happening, and unforgettable afterward. Emotionally neutral periods, on the other hand, pass quickly while they are happening, and practically disappear when they end. This happens because memory doesn't record time, it records meaning. Where there is meaning, there is strong memory. Where there is strong memory, there is a feeling of expanded time. Attention is the fuel of memory. What receives conscious attention is deeply registered. What goes unnoticed is compressed, summarized, discarded. When we live distracted, fragmented, divided among constant stimuli, the brain cannot delve into any experience. It only reacts. It only executes. It only goes through the moment. And when this is repeated day after day, the result is a life full of events, but poor in emotional records. There's a silent transformation that happens when we start living with less mindfulness. Emotions become more superficial. Days begin to look too much alike. Experiences lose their impact. And the brain responds in the only way it knows how, by compressing time. It creates fewer memories. It conserves energy. It reduces the volume of experience. And when you look back, everything seems to have passed too quickly. What's most unsettling is realizing that many adults live surrounded by stimuli, but with little real presence. Notifications, appointments, tasks, constant decisions. The mind is always busy but rarely present. The brain is active but not emotionally engaged. And when there is no engagement, there is no deep memory. Without deep memory, time loses density. Life goes on but seems to slip through our fingers. On the other hand, a single moment of genuine attention is enough to change everything. A true conversation, a conscious silence, a difficult decision, a challenge that takes you out of your comfort zone. In those moments, time slows down. Not because the world has stopped, but because you have finally arrived at that moment. Presence transforms the experience of time from the inside out. It restores texture to life. This is one of the most impactful revelations on this topic. Time is not entirely beyond our control. It's not just something that happens to us. It's shaped by how we feel, choose, and direct our attention. The mindset with which we face each day directly influences whether time is perceived as something scarce or something full of meaning. It's not about doing more things but about living more intensely what is already happening. There's a profound truth hidden here. The more emotionally present we are, the longer life seems. The more absent we are, even when busy, the faster everything passes. This completely changes how we perceive aging, routine, success, and even happiness. The question isn't how much we do but how much we feel while we do it. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because understanding the role of emotions and attention opens up space for even more transformative reflection. If time stretches when we are present, what does that reveal about how we are living our days? What emotions are we allowing ourselves to feel? Which ones are we avoiding? What silent decisions are we making when we choose distraction instead of presence? These choices, made behind the scenes of the mind, shape the entire experience of our journey without us even realizing it. Before moving on, write a word or short phrase in the comments that represents what this part evoked in you. Write it down. That makes sense to me. There's a crucial point in this whole conversation, a silent turning point that completely changes how we perceive time. After understanding how memory, routine, emotions, and attention shape this feeling of acceleration, the question that keeps echoing inside almost inevitably arises: is it possible to slow down time? The short answer is no, at least not on the clock. But the real, deeper, and more transformative answer is different. We can't change time, but we can change how the brain experiences time, and that changes everything. The clock will continue to tick at the same pace. The days will continue to have 24 hours. None of this is under our control. The great turning point happens when we understand that the experience of time doesn't occur outside but inside. It is there, in the background of the mind, that time takes shape, weight, and meaning. When this perception changes, something reorganizes itself internally. The feeling of powerlessness gives way to a real possibility of transformation. Slowing down time in practice doesn't mean doing fewer things, shirking responsibilities, or romanticizing life. It means living in a way that gives the brain reasons to pay attention. It means stepping out of automatic mode and entering, even gradually, a more conscious mode of presence. The brain responds immediately when it perceives novelty, challenge, learning, and emotional engagement. These elements act as anchors that prevent time from slipping away without leaving a trace. Seeking novelty is one of the most direct ways to trigger this change. Novelty doesn't have to be something grand or radical. It can be learning something you've never tried before, changing small habits, exploring different paths, talking to people outside your usual circle. For the brain, novelty is a positive alert signal. It awakens. It registers. It creates memory. And where there is memory, time expands. Learning plays a central role in this journey. Learning something new requires attention, curiosity, and cognitive effort. This breaks old patterns and forces the brain to move out of energy-saving mode. When you learn, the brain actively works to integrate new information. This process creates deep memories. That's why phases of life in which we are learning intensely tend to seem longer, more vivid, and more memorable when recalled later. Breaking routines is another key point, and here lies a hidden truth that few people readily accept. Routine isn't the problem itself. The problem arises when it becomes rigid, too predictable, without room for variation. Small deviations are enough to change the internal experience of time. Changing schedules, altering the order of tasks, introducing new stimuli. These adjustments seem simple, but they have a profound impact on how the brain perceives the days. Mindfulness is perhaps the most powerful element in this shift. Mindfulness isn't something mystical or distant. It's the ability to be fully present in what's happening right now. When you truly pay attention, the brain registers more details, more emotions, more nuances. The moment gains density. And when the moment gains density, it occupies more space in memory. This makes life seem longer, richer, and more meaningful when you look back. This shift in mindset alters how we approach our own journey. Time ceases to be an invisible enemy that haunts us and becomes a direct reflection of how we are living. This brings a different sense of responsibility. Not in the sense of guilt, but of awareness. Every daily choice, however small it may seem, influences the experience of time. Choosing presence instead of distraction. Choosing curiosity instead of repetition. Choosing involvement instead of autopilot. The impact of this goes beyond the perception of time. It touches on identity, purpose, and meaning. When time ceases to seem like a fast-paced sequence of identical days, life takes on a different texture. The feeling of being always late diminishes. The constant urgency loses its power. A greater inner space emerges to feel, reflect, and decide with more clarity. Not because life has slowed down, but because it has become more fully lived. There is something profoundly liberating in realizing that the acceleration of time is not a final sentence. It is a sign. An invitation to change. A silent warning that perhaps we are living more on autopilot than we would like to admit. When this sign is understood, it ceases to frighten and begins to guide. It points to possible adjustments, to conscious choices, to a healthier relationship with the very experience of existence. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because this possibility of slowing down time internally opens up an even more important question. If we can change the way we experience time, what does that reveal about how we are living our own lives? What kind of presence are we cultivating? What kind of stories are we creating in our memory? And what kind of journey do we want to remember when we look back? Before we continue, write a short sentence in the comments that represents how you feel after all this. Comment below, "I'm on this journey too." If you've made it this far, it's because this topic touched on something deeper than simple curiosity. Perhaps it awakened a memory, a new perception, or even a silent unease about how time has been experienced in your own journey. And that's exactly why this channel exists. To create these moments of pause, reflection, and awareness amidst the rush of everyday life. If this content resonated with you, if at any point you thought, "That's exactly how I feel," subscribing to the channel is a natural way to continue this conversation. The idea here is to keep exploring these inner workings of the mind, these hidden truths about the human body, and these phenomena that change the way we see life. Always with depth but without complicating things. If you can also leave a comment saying that you made it to the end. Write something simple like, "This message was for me," or, "I'm with you until the end, I genuinely read," and that helps keep alive this exchange that transforms a video into a shared experience. And if you felt that connection throughout the content, a like is just a silent way of saying, "This was worthwhile." Now, there's a video over here that perfectly complements everything we've discussed today. It delves even deeper into the human mind and how we perceive reality. Click there and continue watching.